Hello, welcome to this webinar today then. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21, and in this webinar we're going to look at what a universal basic income is. We're planning to do several events in the next few months around a universal basic income. We hope to have a couple of other webinars from probably people in Europe where they've experimented with this or they've got plans to experiment with it. We're planning on March the 23rd to have a House of Commons meeting, May the 23rd to have a House of Commons meeting on universal basic income and to develop some discussion around it and look at that issue. And today we've got Barb Jacobson. Barb is from Basic Income UK. And what we wanted to do in this very first webinar is really talk about what a universal basic income is, and whether in fact it will work. There's a lot of people who think that with the changing patterns of employment in the future, technological changes and so on, that the welfare system we've got is not fit for purpose. And we need a system which guarantees a basic income that's administratively more easy than the ones we have now. And a citizen wage, as it's sometimes called, or a universal basic income, may be the thing that fits that bill. Now, the discussion is beginning on that. It's gaining a lot of traction, and a lot of people are beginning to be very interested in that right across Europe, but also globally as well. Anyhow, Barb Jacobson is here. What she's going to do is she's going to talk for about 10 minutes and then answer questions. And then at about 7:30, she'll be joined by Becca Kirkpatrick, Becca. Yeah. She will join us then, and she comes from Birmingham, and she's done some work on basic income there, and she'll tell us about work she's done, and she'll answer with Barb questions from then on. So thank you for joining us, Barb, and it's over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Francis. This is a great opportunity to talk about basic income. For people who don't know, basic income is a payment made to each individual or each legal resident of a particular country. So far, those are the plans, it's really there are various kinds of plans for it. Some are less than is quite enough to live on. Almost nearly all the proposals that I've seen, if it is not enough to live on quite, then it also includes supplements for, say, housing benefit, and particularly in this country, housing benefit and disability benefits. It's certainly gained a lot of traction globally, particularly in the last, say, 2 years. But there's actually been there have been people working on it quite seriously for about 30 years. More than that, it's actually quite an old idea. There are people who claim Thomas More sort of was involved with it, but actually it's sort of more around the end of the 18th century. Thomas Paine proposed a version of it in Agrarian Justice, which was basically a payment to each couple when they got married, and then pensions to people over 50, which were unconditional. There was also a man named Thomas Spence working at the same time who had a bit of a different view of property, who in the rights of infants talked about a payment to each individual based on our common inheritance of the land and also technology. Since then, I mean, people like J.S. Mill, Bertrand Russell, Eric Fromm, Martin Luther King. There have been a lot of people over the years, who have looked at the state of technology at the time and said, well, what we really need is a basic income to smooth over recessions, to free people from having to work a full-time job, to free people up from, to be able to work, to express our talents and to use our training in the best way possible, because sometimes the job market isn't actually doing that. What else to say? Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ideas about it now. It's being taken up quite a lot by Silicon Valley. because you can see with the rise of platform working, sort of working via platforms like Uber and TaskRabbit, these sorts of ways of earning money are very precarious. Plus, also, of course, in this country, we have the rise of zero hour contracts and flexible working. Um, so basic income would make those sorts of arrangements actually work for people in a way that they don't at the moment. Um, and yeah, we have a group called Basic Income UK. We work with an older group called Citizens Income Trust. They've been going since 1986, and they started as the Basic Income Research Group, and they've done a lot of work on different plans within the current tax system. What we're advocating for is a higher basic income. Citizen Income Trust's main plan, I mean, it's just an indicative plan that they've put out, and they have a few other higher plans, but their main plan is at around between 70 and 80 pounds a week, with disability and housing benefits staying in place. We'd like to see a higher figure, more like, say, 12,000 or 14,000 a year, which is more like the living wage. And we feel that basic income should all be paid for using taxes on unearned income. So, higher taxes on dividends, higher taxes on corporate profits, and we're talking about the large ones here. Um, trying to capture the tax that is going offshore into tax havens. Land value tax has also been suggested, but basically, what we're advocating is a full basic income, which would mean that you would not have to do another job in order to survive. And we base it on the idea that there is a common inheritance that we haven't actually managed to benefit from. So that's more or less what basic income is about, and what our group Basic Income UK is advocating for. I think it really, in a way, it kind of turns on its head all the things that we've been taught about work and how work needs to, that you need to do work, you need to do a job in order to earn a living. One of the things that really doesn't take into account is all the things that we do for each other, which we don't get paid for, but without which society would fall apart. And of course, what I'm talking about here is looking after children and looking after older people, your older relatives, looking after people with disabilities and friends, looking after yourself. It's interesting, the women there's a Basic Income Women's Action Group in the US, which is calling for a change from the market-based economy to the care-based economy. And by that, they mean care for ourselves and care for each other and for the earth, which I think is a really interesting idea. And I hope that they'll be taking it farther than that. I certainly come to it from a feminist background. I was in the Wages for Housework campaign in the 80s, and so very much involved with questions of the value of women's work to society and to the economy. And now I'm actually a benefits advisor for a local charity, a small charity in the West End. And the situation with benefits in this country is just getting diabolical. People with disabilities are forced to go through a kind of bettering, a kind of Kafkaesque is all you can call it, round of interviews and assessments, and and they sort of, even you do the assessment and they agree that you are eligible for the benefit, but then 3 months later they call you in again, and it's just getting ridiculous, basically. And people who are unemployed, the sanctioning system that's going on right now is basically what is driving the rise in food banks in this country. It's interesting, in Canada, one of the food bank charities there has actually called for basic income as a way to, because they are actually seriously interested in not having food banks, right? which is good. The Canadian Medical Association has also backed basic income in Canada, mainly for health reasons. And I think, with all the concerns around the NHS at the moment, actually basic income would do a lot to help ease the pressure from the NHS, not just in terms of all the doctor's letters that people need to get disability and sickness benefits, but also in terms of relieving people's stress. And it's becoming more apparent through different studies how much stress over money and poverty is really taking a toll on people's health, both in terms of suicides and illness and accidents and domestic violence and all those sorts of things. They found in the Mincome experiment in Canada, which is sort of like a basic income, but it was just paid to people who were getting Social Security at the time, that hospital visits went down a lot, both for mental health reasons and also for accidents and emergency. It also made quite a big difference in the level of crime in the area, both mainly burglary and domestic violence. It seemed to ease. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of potential benefits. There are a lot of potential savings, not just in terms of sort of packaging up the benefit system and having a simpler system, but also just in terms of relieving the kind of stress and antagonism people feel, or the tensions people feel and within their families about money. Yeah, so we do feel it could have a lot of benefits. At the moment, the Green Party has some proposals. The Royal Society for the Arts has just came out with a report in December about it. Compass is about to release about 4 plans that they've worked on at different levels. And but again, I mean, all the plans that have been published so far in the UK have just been based on the current tax system and based on income tax. And I would like to stress that I do feel very strongly that income tax is one of the things that is really destroying the welfare state, and the fact that people, this split is able to be made, wedged between people who are working and paying taxes and people who can't pay taxes because they can't work. And yeah, so I would like to see an end to that kind of division, but I also would like to see an end to the waste that's going on right now of people's talents and training. I mean, it's very common in most families now that if they have a child which who's gone through university, that they're not able to use their training. They basically have, we've got probably the best educated set of baristas in the world, and that same goes for the States as well. And yeah, that's kind of all I'd like to say for right now. If people have questions.
Okay. Yeah, if people would like to type their, there are 42 people online, so that's pretty good. It's a very good turnout.
Okay.
If people would like to type their questions, their points online, that'd be great. There are quite a lot of people here. One of the groups that we're doing the series of basic income events with are the New Europeans, and I noticed that Roger Casali is online as well. I hope he's still here. Yeah, he's online. So we're glad that they're here, and the New Europeans also have disseminated information about this webinar, and will disseminate the webinar itself when it's over.
Great.
So we've got a first question saying it really goes against the capitalist grain. How do you respond to the argument that no one will bother to work? I don't think that will happen, but that seems to be the main obvious argument.
Well, that's a funny one, really, because people who say that no one will work, if you ask them, well, would you stop working? They say no. So it's always other people that are not going to work. Okay. And of course, I mean, the studies, there have been, as I said, I mentioned the Mincome experiment in Canada in the 70s. There was a more recent one in India, which has just finished. The book of it just came out last year. There was also a very successful experiment in Namibia, and what they actually found was that people's economic activity went up, in the sense that even though what they got in those experiments was very far below subsistence, they were still able to use it to set up their own businesses. that the demand for, say in India, the demand in the areas for better food went up, and people stepped up to provide it. So so actually, it actually generated much more in terms, much more money into those communities than actually was paid out in basic income, as far as I know. So yeah, I mean, most people want to contribute to society in some way, and certainly basic income would mean that work always pays. I mean, with the current system that we have, if you actually need benefits and then you want to take a job, you're looking at keeping somewhere between 3 and 30 pence in the pound of any extra wage that you earn, up until the point when you can't, until you start paying, until you can't, say, get tax credits or something like that. But I think it's important to think of it as more than just a replacement for the welfare system. We're talking about a really different way of thinking about work altogether, and how we do contribute to society. And yeah, that's all I want to say right now.
Okay, we're getting quite a lot of the questions out. By the way, I mean, Ian has
Okay.
said it goes against the capitalist grain. In some ways, that's not true, because a number of people on the right of British politics have also advocated it, haven't they? I mean, Fred Hayek, the great guru of Margaret Thatcher, believed in the basic income. Milton Friedman, who started the Chicago School, believed in the basic income. People from the Institute of Economic Affairs have argued for the basic income. So it's not just a left-wing idea, it's an idea that seems to be gaining traction right across the board. But Anya was saying that she was a bit confused, because she wasn't quite sure how you could actually how you can afford it. Would it come out of income tax? How can the country afford a universal basic income?
Well, in the plans that have been put forward by the RSA and the Citizens Income Trust, I mean, the one that just came out with the RSA is basically requires just a 1% raise in. It's taking just 1% extra of GDP than what the current system does. And that would be with a basic income of 80 pounds a week, again, leaving housing benefit and disability benefits in place. So it's really not much more than the current, these plans are not much more than the current system. What they do, however, is they take away the tax allowance. So they're using the, if you think of the government budget as a zero-sum game, then the tax allowance, which is now £10,000 a year, is a cost to the government. Okay, so they use that as part of their figures, and yeah, I mean, I think affordability is as much. It's as much about where we are with our tax system. It's where we are with what we think is important in society. Are we going to spend? I mean, at the moment, the government is transferring more and more money to the private companies and to charities who are involved with the work program, and less is actually going to the people who need it. So I would like to see. I mean, the thing is that people don't realize that the work program is largely subsidized by the European Social Fund, and they those sorts of figures, it's about 38 billion, and those sorts of figures don't actually end up, people don't realize that that's also part of the mix.
Yeah, Davin says, has anyone done any calculations as to how much it would cost to have a universal income?
Oh, many people have done calculations. There are all kinds of calculations out there. I mean, the Citizens Income Trust has several plans on their website. That's at citizenincome.org if people want to investigate those. As I said, the RSA, which is thersa.org, they have a plan. They have a plan which they came out with in December. Fairly soon, the think tank Compass is coming out with 4 different schemes that they've costed. Yeah, I mean, there's no lack of costed plans, that's for sure. The Green Party came out with their plan last year, so you can look it up on their website. Yeah, there's lots of, all certainly at this level, at sort of 70 to 80 pounds a week, there's certainly quite a lot of costed plans. And one thing that we're doing at Basic Income UK is looking into is costing up, like if it were based on money that was not income tax, if it was other sorts of taxes, then how would that work? So watch this space.
Yeah, if Bill says if we have a basic universal income, does that mean that all earned income is taxed, and if so, at what rates?
Again, you can look at the plans. The rates vary quite a lot. Yeah, it would mean that I mean, in the current plans from Citizens Income Trust and the RSA, that yes, those would be taxed. There would still be income tax, which would be payable from the get-go. Okay, so if you take away the tax allowances, then yes, you would be paying tax on on any income earned on top of your basic income. But again, there are a lot of different ideas about how it should be paid for, and I think one of the best ones is if we had a sovereign wealth fund based on our resources and on copyright and patent receipts. So, and that would basically not be an income tax. It would be money that people just get because they happen to own a piece of paper.
Davin asked that if you had a universal basic income, would it mean that people would stop doing low-paid jobs like sweepers and cleaners, and is that a problem?
Well, it's really a problem. I mean, you can look at it the other way, which is that people who are forced to do those, why should people be forced to do those jobs for so little money, when in fact I would be far happier for the people who pick, who take the rubbish away. I'd be far happy for them to be paid, the same as a banker. They're certainly much more necessary than a banker, or an investment banker. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, what we hope for basic income is that it will be enough so that people will have the power to demand more money for those sorts of jobs.
Okay, Steve says he's seen workable schemes such as the Reform Scotland one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
That housing benefit and council tax benefit would still be a problem, as their gradual loss would mean, in effect, high marginal costs to taking extra work.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Could you say that again, because you were kind of breaking up?
He says, I have seen workable schemes such as Reform Scotland, that housing benefit and tax and council tax benefit would still be a problem, as their gradual loss, they will be faded out, would mean in effect high marginal cost to taking extra work.
Yeah, well, that's, I think that's probably true of their scheme, but as I say, there are other schemes, and we need to, I think we need to press to make sure that if any kind of basic income is put through, that nobody be poor because of it.
Maria Nash, who's on here, talks about the problems disabled people have in getting work. Universal income would be very valuable in that case, wouldn't it?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And all the different attacks. I mean, the government's taken away the Independent Living Fund. They're making it so incredibly difficult dealing with, particularly with the new PIP, with the personal independence payments. It's actually, what's happening at the moment is that people are having to stop work because they're not able, they can't afford to actually get there, or they can't afford the car that they need, or they can't afford the extra help that they need to get out the door. So in fact, what the government's doing at the moment is I would say is actually more anti-work than basic income, particularly for people with disabilities.
Yeah. Martin's saying, do you have any figures on how much money could be saved in the UK by scrapping means testing?
Again, it's all on Citizens Income website, and I have to refer to that if people want to look those things up. I mean, I think that they can see all the figures there, really.
Okay, and Roger.
I mean, you would save, it would be something on the order of 150 billion, but don't quote me on that. That's yeah, that's just
Okay.
something that came into mind.
Yeah. Okay, we won't cover
But I mean,
that.
there's loads. I mean, I guess what I want to say is that, you know, for the people with questions about details of plans and that sort of thing, there are lots of them out there. You need to look them up. I'm here to just kind of to discuss the idea more than I am to discuss, you know, sort of individual figures and that sort of thing.
Okay, Roger Casali is asking, is the basic income gaining much traction right across Europe?
Oh, it certainly is. People are not aware. Finland is working on doing their own pilots, hopefully in the next sort of 2 years or so. There's been quite a big push for it in France, where MPs from all you know, from a broad range of parties are interested in setting up pilots. The Netherlands has been quite famous for wanting to set up pilots in different. The most famous one was Utrecht, but there are actually 20 localities in the Netherlands where the local politicians are interested in setting up pilots. In Austria, they're actually pushing not for pilots, but to actually get basic income, and they have a costed plan for that country. People might be aware that Switzerland will be voting on in a referendum on the question on the 5th of June. So that's something to watch out for. In Italy, there's been quite a big push, not a full basic income in the sense that it would get rid of all means testing, but for at least a minimum guaranteed income, which would be otherwise unconditional. So that's interesting. Podemos had. Yeah.
Anya, by the way, is asking what RSA is, and RSA is the Royal Society of Arts, and they did a report. They did a report on basic income. So when people use acronyms, I suppose we ought to say what they are. Steve says, "Is the EU a barrier to there being a basic income based on citizenship?" Sure, Roger will come back on that one, but Steve asked that question.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one reason why another group that I'm involved in, which is Unconditional Basic Income Europe, we're working on some plans for a Euro dividend, which would be paid to all citizens of Europe. So, yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, I basically at the moment, the way EU law works, each country is responsible for its own social security system. And while certain benefits can be paid to people outside the country, nationals outside the country, and other benefits are paid for people that work in this country but have relatives outside. In general, each country is responsible for its own benefit system.
I mean, Roger actually says, couldn't we have a basic income for all EU citizens financed through the gains from economic integration in the single market and finance through VAT?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Couldn't we have a basic income from all EU citizens financed through the gains from economic integration in the single market and financed through value-added tax? Or is that a question that you want to pass?
Okay, I didn't quite hear that. Francis, again, you really broke up throughout that. Yeah, but I think I kind of understand the question.
Yeah.
There is in fact, this person to propose a Euro dividend, which is based on VAT, was Philippe Van Parijs, back about sort of 2006 or 2008. And that would be based on VAT, and his idea was that there would be a basic, a Euro dividend paid to individuals in each country based on their GDP. There are other ideas about a potential Euro dividend, which might be based on a financial transaction tax. I mean, one thing is that a Euro dividend probably wouldn't be enough to live on in the richer countries, but say the proposals that I've seen, which are between sort of 150 and 200 euros a month, would make a massive difference in places like Bulgaria and Romania and Greece and those countries that have really suffered the most from the crisis.
Yes,
and it would actually involve a lower quite a small chunk of GDP from the richer countries to pay for as well.
Yes, someone actually suggested in the chat that it could be paid for by transaction tax, or as she calls it, many people do, a Robin Hood tax. Mary says something interesting. She says that if you have a basic income, which might be a redistributive one, then more money will be released into the economy because poor people will spend, whereas rich people will hoard. So actually having a basic income helps with economic growth.
Absolutely. That's one of the major arguments for it, actually. I mean, when people, what they found through in studies is that people, poor, what you want to call them, poor, or people that are on lower incomes spend almost all of their money, and that there's a real kind of multiplier effect within poor communities of something on the order of 4 to 5 times. So say for each pound you'd spend in a place, say like Hull or say poorer parts of London, it would actually boost those areas, as long as they didn't spend them in multinational corporations, of course. But if people were spending, trading between each other and spending in smaller businesses, it would really be a massive boost for local economies, for sure.
Okay, a number of people are putting links up which people might want to refer to, and these should get sent out to people in the recording.
I was afraid to do that because I didn't.
No, it's okay. Including the citizenincome.org. So if anyone has any links they would like to put up, please do. Incidentally, I'll put our own GlobalNet link up as well. And if any of you are not members of GlobalNet, lots of people attend webinars now who are not, then you can join up through that link as well. We'd really welcome you there, because that way we'll get to know about all our other webinars that are coming up. DA has been asking this question. He's had it on the screen for some time, which is not directly about basic income, but he obviously feels very strongly about it. He says, is it still okay for people to get extremely rich in a society that implements basic income? If that is their personal choice, should they have the freedom to pursue it, or should we stop it?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of proposals for a maximum income. Right, which I think that's interesting. I think that at the moment, I mean, we put up with a lot of people getting a lot of money for nothing, and I think really what needs to happen is that as I said before, I think what needs to happen is that particularly unearned income is taxed much more heavily than it is at the moment. I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, corporate profits were taxed up to 80-90%, and we saw the benefits of that in terms of infrastructure and other, and the social security system and everything else. They've managed, in the last sort of 40 years or so, the whole kind of ideology of low tax, that somehow corporations really shouldn't have to pay so much tax has really taken hold, and now it's down to 20%, and that's really been a big loss for society. I certainly think, if people can make a lot of money, but it really depends on how you do it. If you've actually earned it, I personally feel that if you're working, that kind of the income from that shouldn't be taxed. We should really be, I mean, the system at the moment actually doesn't encourage work. There's a kind of swizz about hardworking people, but in fact, people are actually working too hard right now.
Okay.
Because of debt, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Adam asks, has there been any trials that reasonably stipulate or simulate how it might work in practice, and that provide reliable stats and act as an indicator of how well it works? And if you have any links, he says that would be great.
Yeah, I don't want to put links up right now because it would mean me kind of bouncing out of this chat room. But we can do that later. But certainly, I mean, the latest sort of pilot study with stats and everything else is the one that was done in India, and the book for that is called Basic Income: A Transformative Policy for India, and that has all the how they set up the experiment, who they set it up with, the Self-Employed Women's Association. They also did tests of you know, whether it makes a difference to have a community organization like SEWA involved or not, as well as whether, you know, just purely, you know, there were also control villages that didn't get any basic income. So
Okay.
that's probably the best for those sorts of stats if you're looking for them. Evelyn Forget has also done she's done quite a study of the Mincome experiment in Canada, because basically when that was stopped, all the records for it were hidden in a basement in Ottawa somewhere, and she found them a few years ago, and as an epidemiologist, or a population epidemiologist, she studied it on health grounds. So those are the two things really to look up.
Paul actually says that one of his security guards pays £500 a month just for a room. And I think what he's saying is that, you know, housing's a real big problem, and a universal basic income is not going to deal with housing poverty at something like £350 a month, which is what some people say the basic income should be. It's not a huge amount.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, everybody, you know, even the people who put those plans out recognize that. That's not, you know, that's one reason why a lot of people propose a land value tax to pay for basic income, which would mean basically that landlords, that the rents over and above a management fee would actually go back to the government. And it's on the idea that people don't create land, but we do create what's on top of it. So that might be one way to sort of keep, you know, to keep a hold on rents. There are also, of course, proposals for both, you know, rent caps and other things around. And that's, I mean, I would like to see that sort of going along with basic income, because obviously, you know, the danger is that, you know, if you get basic income and there are no rent caps, that landlords might capture that, for sure.
Rodney Jack says, if Britain left the EU, how would that affect basic income? Now, that's a question we don't expect you to answer, because it's a huge question. But it's a question, and I mean, if you want to answer it, you can, but I wouldn't expect anyone to answer.
Yeah, I don't think it would really make any difference, because again, the EU has no say in Britain's social security system. That's part of the treaties at the moment. I mean, it might mean that Britain would lose out on a euro dividend if we managed to get that through, but other than that, I mean, I don't think it would make that much difference.
Okay, we've got Becca who's just joined us now. Hi, Becca.
Hi, Francis.
Barb, would you like to hand over to Becca and get her to say what she was going to say?
Hi. Just like to introduce Becca Kirkpatrick. She's been very involved with basic income up in Birmingham, and with various union activities, and
Sorry, I'm just still getting boxes popping up. Sorry, there we go.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, Becca, do you want to tell us about your experience?
Sure, thank you, and hi. So again, sorry I was late. I first heard about basic income. It was a news report about the Swiss referendum. I think probably sometime last year, or maybe the year before. From then, started reading loads about it all around the world, what's happened in the past, what's happened currently, and I was struck from loads of angles of why, personally, I would find it a really amazing step, and for lots of people I know as well. So for a decade I've been a very active trade unionist, first of all working in the health service, and then lots of activity outside my own workplace as well, writing a trade union magazine, trade union councils and stuff as well. So I'm interested in the decline in workers' bargaining power, and we're in a very weak position to actually organise ourselves to increase the social conditions that we fought for and that are currently being taken away from us. So from that perspective, and being a member of Unison, which employs lots of low-paid workers like cleaners and carers in very exploitative industries, the idea for me of a livable basic income, which would allow people who don't actually choose to work as a cleaner or carer to have the option to do something else. I just thought that would really force employers to have to increase pay for jobs which should already be paid a lot more. I've also got a disabled sister who receives care, so I've got a dual interest there. I don't want anyone to have to work in care that doesn't want to. I want the people who are caring for my sister to be doing that extremely hard job because they love that job. It's not fair on people receiving care, and it's not fair on people working in that industry. I'm also interested in how technology could make a lot of jobs obsolete, and we should be able to celebrate that. But because, and we're seeing this right now in discussions around Trident, where trade unions feel they have to stick to the line of let's save the most jobs, whereas really lots of us would probably love to not be doing our current jobs. We just have to do them. So I was interested in that aspect of it. I also I've trained in martial arts for a lot of years. I like fitness. My partner's a boxing coach. Again, so that whole interesting thing of people, number one, they can't afford to eat healthily. They can't really afford to rest enough. They have to work all the time. They can't afford to put in the training they would like to. And a lot more of us, if we could dedicate more time to training or other things, other projects that take time, those could really flourish, where at the moment they're just kept on the side for a few hours here and there that we can scrape together in the week. So I've probably said enough about my interest there. My day job, I'm a community organiser currently. I got into that because I thought the methods could be really helpful actually to the trade unions in the first place. So me and a few of my other union friends are now trying to apply those techniques to organising around basic income. So it's fantastic that academics and high-level politicians are starting to discuss it, and all those Silicon Valley investors, great, that's very influential. But if that's all that happens, that won't be enough to see it come to reality. So I'm interested in what we can do right now at the base, and that means getting out into all the networks of parent and toddler groups and schools and sports clubs, as I already mentioned, and union branches and churches and mosques and temples, and explaining how all these different constituencies could be positively affected by basic income, and then preparing very thoroughly to take that message to the decision makers, because they've already told us, I mean, whatever they think in private about the idea, unless they're hearing it from voters or potential voters, they won't feel safe to bring it in. It's our job to make them feel safe and comfortable that it's a popular public policy, and the way we do that is getting together, talking about the stories of our real lives, and then persuading them that it's a vote winner.
That's a good point, because lots of people are asking on here, quite a few people ask, is how do you sell this idea to the general population? Becca, you are actually trying to do that. What would your advice be about how you can sell this idea and make it a popular one?
How to sell? Okay, well, I don't want to claim that I have the answer or all the answers, but something that we would train people in community organising methods is facts and figures are, I mean, they're great, and they're great for certain things, especially in academia. I love science. I'm quite nerdy, so I love facts and figures, but a lot of research tells us that they're not the most persuasive of things. You can have all the correct facts in the world on paper, but is that going to influence politics? Maybe not. What takes into a different territory is when you're using personal stories. So where we had a workshop the start of last week actually in Birmingham, and what we always try and do, and it's a nice way for people to get to know each other as well, is people share real stories from their life. You know, what's their life like now, and how would their life be different with this improvement or this change? In this case, it'd be basic income. So really crystally tell the story, you know, the real names, what happened, put some drama in there, you know, build up the tension, the drama, oh, and then this happened, and that's the kind of thing. If you then sitting down in front of an MP and you've got, you know, you've got a church minister and someone, you know, a school head or food bank person who runs a food bank, and you're telling the stories, and someone who uses a food bank, they're using their own words. No one's speaking for anyone else. You're looking them in the eye. That's very different then from, you know, a really well worded research paper which can get flicked through and talked about in a dusty conference forever, but doesn't actually grab anyone.
Okay. Incidentally, someone said that he first heard of this idea from social credit, and has anyone heard of that? I've actually heard of that. I mean, it was C.H. Douglas, I think, who started the social credit movement in England, and it became very popular in Canada. And in fact, in British Columbia and in Alberta in the 1930s, they had both social credit governments, and I think Premier Bennett in British Columbia was Prime Minister then, the Premier then, because it was a province, who tried to introduce social credit ideas, but it didn't.
Well, the social credit movement actually, sorry Francis, if I can jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Francis, can I jump in
yeah,
with this? Yeah, just to say that the social credit movement was also in the U.S. and also very popular in the U.K. Basically up until the Second World War, people were organizing for that, and that also included a land, it included a land tax or land value tax, and public banking. I think the three actually really go together.
Okay, I mean, that's some of the sort of background and history. Number of people are raising some interesting points. I mean, some people have said they like the idea of, people being freed up to do the work they want. And one of the ideas about basic income is that if people have got a basic income, they've got a bit of basic security, and they can then start looking for jobs that they enjoy doing rather than jobs that they have to do. Is that something that you feel, Barb or Becca?
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, I think it's really important. Yeah. Go ahead, Becca. Sorry.
Very quickly, definitely. I got the example already mentioned of my sister receiving her care. The other very big motivation for my family around basic income is my partner I mentioned already. Currently, Daz, would you like to quickly show your face? This is Daz.
Hi.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to duck down. There's Daz.
Okay.
Daz, thank you.
Hi,
He works very hard all day long. There's like hundreds of people watching as well. So.
Is there?
Yeah, and he so he gets up at 5:30 every morning to go and lay tarmac, which pays the bills. It's exhausting, and it's very, very, very hard on his back in particular, smelling in all the tarmac fumes all day, whereas really he would like to be teaching boxing. At the moment he volunteers, he does that for free in his evenings, gets home late because he's volunteering, training up champion kids and adults to be champion amateur boxers. So with basic income, obviously he could say goodbye to his tarmacing boss and go and do something that he chooses to do, not necessarily for pay, maybe for pay. He could get some training. Daz has got lots and lots of skills that right now are not being put to use at all.
Okay.
I think it's really important actually to emphasize how much is wasted at the moment in terms of what people can do. You know, whether that's like Daz's story, or or whether that's whether that's somebody wasting their education in working in a coffee bar or whatever. Okay, I mean there's just such a huge amount of waste going on right now, and the way people are being forced into any old job, any old job that they can get, is really not actually a very efficient way to deal with society, all told, I think. Can I just mention one thing, just to say that there's an early day motion which Carolyn Lucas from the Green Party has put forward. There are about 29 MPs at the moment who've put their support on it. But it would be nice to get more, and certainly more Labour Party people. It's been mainly supported by the Scottish National Party, and obviously Carolyn Lucas put it forward, so from the Green Party. But at the moment we only have four Labour MPs on it, and it would be great if people did speak to their MPs about it. And it's just calling for the government to look into the idea. It's not it's not calling for full basic income, so the MP doesn't necessarily have to agree with basic income, but just to convince them that it would be an interesting thing to try out.
Okay. Yeah, if you can put pressure on MPs, that's great. And one of the Labour MPs we've written to see if she would come to our meeting in May. We're going to try and write to Caroline Lucas as well. So that should be great. Mary says something that no one's mentioned, and we mentioned about people doing jobs they want. She said that if you had a basic income, it would be great for small businesses because they can expand, knowing that they can take on people without the worry of not being able to eat. In other words, basic income helps small businesses.
Yep. Potentially could help people start small businesses, definitely. I think that's one of the persuasive strands of the arguments. I know that's part of why Silicon Valley is interested. And I know it's part of why some MPs here, including some Labour MPs who perhaps haven't actually come out in favour of it, but are in favour behind closed doors. Again, they're interested in how it could support entrepreneurs. More could be made of that. I mean, myself personally, again, me and Daz might be able to do something like that if we had the security of basic income.
Okay. We've got several other questions coming up. I mean, Nalna keeps saying, and I'm not sure if we've addressed his point, he asked it right at the beginning of the webinar, and he's asking it again. He says, I agree in principle, but how can we be sure that if we had it, people would be around to do the unpopular kinds of work? Who would do those?
Right.
Well, we need... Go ahead, Becca, yeah.
I was going to say some of my thinking, which I'll refer to what I said at the start again about, for example, cleaning. Yeah, I mean, let's imagine there's basic income that you could live on. People who don't want to be a cleaner could stop that. Then cleaning companies would have two choices. They could either automate the cleaning, which might be fine, or they could have to pay more to attract people to do the work, which again, it makes it more like a true market where instead of the worker having always the being on the bottom and having to take what's out there, in fact, the employer has to then bid for the labour, which is what the worker is selling.
Okay, and Barb, if I can ask you this question, it's Duart, I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's raised a question that someone's raised before, though you referred to it. He says, basic income is going to be essential if there's not going to be unrest in the future, because new technologies means lots of jobs will go. We will develop what some people call the gig economy. You'll be in work for a little while and then off, and you'll be on another work project, then off and then on again. Technology is going to mean the work is not going to be like it was, so you're going to have some other principle to keep the solidarity of society together, and basic income is one of those ideas.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So,
I agree.
I mean, I think it's not just that we're hitting the technology wall. I think we're also hitting the environmental wall. And basic income, I think, is really important so that, as Becca mentioned about Trident, but also other, say, other polluting industries and other industries that are actually quite harmful, that people have the choice about whether they actually get involved with them, or also be able to make a struggle within their companies to repurpose. I mean, there's a lot of things that actually need doing, which the market is really not paying for.
Yeah.
Say, for example, like with renewables, all right, you know, the government's had to subsidize that. Now they're withdrawing the subsidy, you know, which is it's just a really terrible situation. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I think people, you know, in order to really get to grips with the environmental crisis that's going on right now, we're going to need basic income. You know, first of all, to allow people to work on the ideas to get us through it, and also to allow people to refuse to do the kinds of work which is damaging other people and the environment around them, as well as themselves.
Okay, right. It's someone, Rodney Jack, who said maybe this is the last question. Are there any big names supporting basic income, or is it still under the radar in a lot of cases, or are people afraid to do it?
Yeah, well, we've got several Nobel laureates who are supporting it, or saying that it's really the only thing that's going to deal with a lot of these issues we discussed this evening. Joseph Stiglitz is a supporter. At the moment, there's a couple other Nobel laureates whose names escape me. Brian Eno has recently come out in favor of basic income and has been doing a lot to push it behind the scenes, I think. And who else is a big name? I don't know. Big name. It's so relative to who you are.
Bob.
Go for it.
In the UK, there's a crossbench peer called Lord Sidelsky, who's an economic historian as well. He's also, quite a few months ago, it was in connection actually with the question of the living wage. He's come out in favour of basic income. I'm not sure how influential he is, but he's probably the most senior in terms of our country's power structures, who's explicitly come out in favour.
Okay, well, we're coming close to the end of that. Robert Skidelsky.
I mean, several columnists for the Financial Times, including Wolf, has talked about it. You know.
Okay. I was just going to say it's Robert Skidelsky, isn't it? He wrote a biography of John Maynard Keynes, and that's you know.
But also his son. In fact, I mean, his son Edward Skidelsky is going to be speaking at a Basic Income and Degrowth conference in Hamburg in May. So I'm assuming he supports it as well. So.
Okay. Well, listen, we've come to the end of the hour now, so we're pretty well there. It goes very quickly when, you know, there are lots of questions and there are lots of people. There have been a lot of people on tonight. We had about nearly 80 people who registered and over 40 turned up, and 50% of those who are registering turning up is a very high percentage. So that's really good. So I want to thank both of you,
well, thank you, everyone,
Becca, for taking part of this. And for all those people who put in questions, you will get a recording of this and you will see, I think, the questions on it. So you will also see the links that are on it. I will put the link up again for GlobalNet 21, which I've just done. You know, if you want to find out more about our events in the future, including the ones we're going to do on basic income, then sign up to GlobalNet 21 and you will be kept fully informed of the events that we're doing. We are planning to carry this on. We will have some webinars with Europe that we're working with Barb and Roger Casal over, and also we'll be having a meeting that we're doing with the New Europeans in the House of Commons on May the 23rd, and Barb will be speaking at that meeting as well. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay, so good night for now.